Hello everyone, welcome back. It's me, HXH Anime. Today, we're going to dive into the biography of Hisoka Morow. So without wasting any time, let's get started. The story begins one day somewhere on the European continent. A young boy was lying on the roadside, barely clinging to life, when a traveling circus happened to find him and take him in. Glam Gasland is a city located in the northern part of the European continent, northeast of York New City. For many years, this region was covered with red earth and mountains, and it used to be an extremely poor area. Originally, Glam was a nomadic group. When they arrived in this land, they discovered a valuable natural gas source scattered throughout the mountain ranges. Because of that, they abandoned their nomadic lifestyle that had lasted for centuries and began settling near the fuel deposits. Over time, the land where these nomads lived gradually became known as Glam Gasland, and people from all over flocked there to extract gas. But eventually, the inevitable happened. The gas reserves began to dry up. Even so, the Glam family had already become incredibly wealthy from managing those resources. After that, they turned their attention to a new type of business: casinos. Casinos were built alongside luxurious hotels. To compete with one another and attract customers, they invited the best magicians to perform. And that was exactly how circus troupes like the one led by Morow came into existence. They performed in the grand halls of these hotels, and over time, the performing arts became a commercial symbol of this gas valley. There were many kinds of performances here: juggling, weightlifting, magic tricks, but the act the residents looked forward to the most was sky swimming performed by Morow. The young boy Hisoka carefully observed every single performance by the troupe with incredible attention. Within the circus, the person who usually kept Hisoka company was a girl around his age named Abaki. Even though she had joined earlier, she was the youngest member, so she was often the one sent around to do errands. Many members of the troupe also disagreed with allowing Hisoka to stay. However, Morow firmly insisted on keeping the boy. He explains that he himself used to be nothing more than a pickpocket who disguised himself as a shoe shiner just to survive, and many others in the troupe came from similarly lowly backgrounds. Borzoy argued back, saying that was all in the past. Right now, they were facing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to perform at the Royal Glam Hotel, and he didn't want any risks that might ruin it. While the two were arguing, Mori quietly reminded Borzoy that someone was approaching. The young Hisoka stepped forward. He praised their previous performance and politely asked if he had accidentally interrupted their conversation. Borzoy then walked away. Mori asked Hisoka if he could perform something, perhaps a magic trick. Hisoka immediately performed a card trick. Morow silently thought to himself that this boy might actually be more skilled than he was. When Mori asked who had taught him, Hisoka replied that his mother was extremely skilled with that technique. At that moment, Abaki interrupted the conversation and complained that Mori had forgotten his promise to train her. Before leaving, Mori reminded Hisoka that he possessed a talent as precious as gold and that he should continue honing it. Cut to another scene. It turns out that the thing Morow had promised Abaki was Nen, and she was currently training her Ten technique. Abaki also told Mori that many members of the troupe were worried about Hisoka. They wondered whether he had gotten involved in something dangerous to end up half dead on the roadside. Some even suspected, like Borzoy said, that he might have connections to the underground mafia. Mori replied that no matter what had happened, they couldn't just abandon someone who had nowhere to go. He told Abaki to stay focused on her training and added that Hisoka was about her age, so she should treat him kindly. He also commented that the boy's tricks were quite impressive. After that day, Abaki kept thinking about Mori's words. Treat him kindly, huh? She wondered how she was supposed to start a conversation with a boy who was always wandering around alone. Then she remembered when she first joined the circus, she had probably been the same way. Thinking about that, she decided she would try talking to Hisoka. One time, while visiting town with Morow, Abaki noticed a public warning about a series of recent murders on the European continent. The culprit was a killer known for having many different identities and faces. The victims were found with their bodies brutally crushed to death. Evidence suggested that all the massacres were committed by the same person. However, surveillance cameras showed a different face at every crime scene. And with each new murder, a completely new face appeared. Because of this, the media gave the killer the nickname Hundred-Faced John Doe. This murderer seemed to enjoy drawing attention. After every killing, he deliberately revealed his face to the cameras. Morow warned Abaki to be careful when going outside at night and never enter dark alleys. Back at the circus, during practice, Kishita accidentally tripped and broke his leg. It was extremely unfortunate since they were about to perform at the Princess Hotel. Mori suggested changing the juggling act, but everyone was confused because they didn't know what performance could replace it. Right then, Hisoka volunteered. Yasuda laughed mockingly and asked, "Don't tell me you're planning to go on stage and do some card magic or something." Hisoka calmly replied that he would perform the juggling act just like Kishita. This made Yasuda furious, thinking the boy was mocking him. "Hey kid, don't joke around. I swear, if you weren't just a child, I would..." Mori grabbed Yasuda's shoulder to hold him back and asked Hisoka if he was serious. Without saying another word, Hisoka immediately performed a flawless juggling demonstration. "I've already figured out the technique," he said. He explained that he'd watched Kushita practice many times, so he fully understood how it worked. Abaki was nervously asking Mori if this was really okay, but Mori actually found the situation quite interesting. Yasuda had no choice but to accept it, but deep down, resentment had already begun to grow, and he secretly started thinking about revenge. During the performance at the Princess Hotel, the juggling act was already underway when the audience suddenly noticed something unexpected, a brand new face on stage, and it was just a child. Abaki was also extremely nervous because this was the first time Hisoka Morow had ever performed in front of such a large crowd. Meanwhile, Yasuda grew increasingly irritated as he watched Hisoka perfectly replicate the juggling technique that had taken him 12 years to master. "This is irritating. I'll show you a technique that only Kushita and I can perform." In anger, Yasuda threw a juggling pin towards Hisoka, but with his sharp reflexes, Hisoka easily caught it and tossed it right back. Yasuda failed to catch it, and in that moment, he realized just how massive the gap in their abilities truly was. After that incident, Yasuda quietly left the circus troupe and never returned to the stage again. Following this event, many members of the circus began to worry that Hisoka might steal their skills as well, so they started practicing their techniques in secret. In a later conversation, Moritonyo mentioned that everyone had begun feeling uneasy. However, he personally believed that Hisoka wasn't truly interested in stealing their tricks. Hisoka, however, admitted that there was one ability he genuinely wanted to steal, Moritonyo's sky swimming technique. He commented that the skill looked extremely interesting. Mori replied that he had no intention of teaching it to him for now, and that the ability didn't rely on ordinary talent or stage tricks, but on something entirely different. Hisoka immediately asked if it had something to do with the faint light surrounding Mori's body. Mori was surprised that Hisoka could see it. Perhaps thanks to his natural instincts and exceptional observation skills, the boy had already noticed it. Mori confirmed that the power was called Nen. After that, Mori began teaching Nen to Hisoka. He told him to observe his own body carefully. Around every person there exists a faint glow. This is called aura, something that everyone possesses. Hisoka noted that his own aura looked rather weak, while Mori's was much thicker. Mori explained that it's because he has spent many years training it. People who can strengthen and manipulate their aura at will are called Nen users. Normally, aura flows naturally around the body. When a person can maintain a steady layer of aura surrounding themselves, that technique is called Ten. When they increase the amount of aura they produce, it is called Ren. Curious about Ren, Hisoka asked to see it. Mori told Abaki to demonstrate. Abaki immediately focused her aura, and the Nen surrounding her body surged dramatically. This instantly amazed Hisoka. Mori put an arm over Hisoka's shoulder and explained that this was Ren, one of the fundamental abilities used to mold or release aura, something every Nen user must learn. Practicing Ten is the path that eventually leads to mastering Ren. He added that if Hisoka had truly talent, he might master Ten within a year. Mori explained that normally it takes about 3 years to reach Abaki's level, but she had managed to master Ten in just 9 months. Mori also said that he would teach Hisoka how to use Nen once a week on the condition that he continued performing with the circus troupe starting from their next show. Hisoka agreed. During another conversation with Abaki, Hisoka asked whether all the members of the circus were Nen users. Abaki replied that they weren't. Mori had tried many times to teach Nen to the others, but she was the only one who had succeeded. She added that their leader had once dreamed of becoming a hunter. Hisoka became curious. A hunter? Yeah, Abaki explained. Hunters are people who search for treasures or travel to unexplored lands. In other words, they're true adventurers. Mori had even taken the hunter exam once, but that year only a single person managed to pass. During that extremely harsh exam, Mori encountered someone with overwhelming talent. The gap between their abilities was so huge that it left him feeling disappointed in himself. Personally, I have a theory. The one person who passed that exam, possibly the 267th Hunter exam, might have been none other than Ging Freaks, the 2-star ruins hunter, one of the creators of Greed Island, the boar of the Zodiacs, and a Nen user praised as being among the top 5 Nen users in the world. Of course, that's just speculation. We don't actually know which hunter exam Moritonyo participated in. Back to the story. Abaki believes the reason Mori is willing to teach Nen to her, to Hisoka, or to anyone else is because he still hopes that one day he will have a student as talented as the hunter who passed that exam. Maybe he still hasn't completely given up on his dream. Abaki also talked about her own dream. One day she wants to fulfill Mori's dream for him. She plans to leave the circus and pass the hunter exam. When Hisoka asked what exactly she wanted to hunt, Abaki admitted she hadn't decided yet. Hisoka commented that it sounded like a rather vague dream. A little embarrassed, Abaki clarified that she wanted to travel around the world, which made her think about becoming an archaeological hunter. But she also loved delicious food, so sometimes she considered becoming a gourmet hunter instead. Hearing this, Hisoka calmly told her to relax. He handed her a piece of candy and said it was bungee gum. Then Abaki asked Hisoka whether he thought he would be able to learn Ten. Chewing the candy, Hisoka confidently replied that he definitely would. Just 1 week later, Hisoka had already mastered both Ten and Ren. "I'm pretty sure this won't take a whole year for me, Moritonio." Both Mori and Abaki were completely shocked by the speed of his progress. Then Mori said it was time to move on to the next stage. He explained that Nen is divided into 6 categories. Enhancement strengthens the natural abilities of an object or one's own body. Transmutation changes the properties of aura. Conjurtion creates physical objects such as weapons. Emission allows aura to be projected away from the body. Manipulation controls objects, creatures, or other beings. And specialization, unique abilities that do not belong to the other 5 categories. All of these abilities ultimately rely on projecting and controlling aura. This is what is known as Hatsu. Hisoka then asked if being an enhancer-type Nen user meant that a person wouldn't be able to learn abilities from the emission category. Moritonio explained that every Nen user has the strongest affinity with their own category, but they can still learn techniques from other categories. However, abilities that are closer to their natural type on the Nen chart are easier to learn, while those farther away become increasingly difficult to master. Hisoka continued asking how someone could determine their own Nen type. Mori silently thought to himself that this boy was truly ambitious. Then he explained that there was a method called water divination. With this technique, a person pours their aura into a glass of water and observes how the water changes. Based on that reaction, they can determine their Nen type. It's also a method often used to train the basic foundations of Nen. Mori demonstrated first. After performing the test, he handed the glass of water to the 2 kids and asked them to taste it. When she tried it, Abaki said the water tasted very bitter, while Hisoka Morow simply commented that it was quite interesting. Mori explained that a change in the taste of the water indicated the transmutation type. Next, Abaki performed water divination. This time, the color of the water changed, so Mori concluded that she belonged to the emission type. Abaki looked slightly disappointed because she had once hoped she would be a manipulation type, so she could use that ability for stage performances. Then it was Hisoka's turn. However, after he performed the water divination test, the glass of water appeared completely unchanged. Hisoka found it strange since there seems to be no reaction at all. Without hesitation, he suddenly forced the glass to Abaki's lips. The moment she tasted it, she immediately shouted because the water had an extremely sour taste. Abaki looked both surprised and annoyed, while Hisoka simply laughed it off. Mori then concluded that Hisoka was the same as him. He also belonged to the transmutation type. Hisoka asked if transmutation was the category that allowed someone to change the properties of their aura, right? After that, Mori said that from now on they would continue focusing on training the fundamental techniques of Nen, polishing them until the changes in water divination became more noticeable. For now, however, they needed to prepare for their performance at the Royal Glam Hotel the following week. One night, while returning from the market after buying supplies for the circus troupe, Abaki accidentally turned into the wrong alley. There, she encountered the infamous killer Hundred-Faced John Doe, who was crushing a man's body to death. Abaki immediately shouted for him to stop. She infused her aura into the metal-tipped whip she carried and launched an attack. Although she lacked experience, she believed that an ordinary person wouldn't be able to withstand a Nen-infused whip. But John Doe was no ordinary opponent. He easily grabbed the whip, then drove his knee into Abaki's stomach, making her cough up blood. At that moment, she realized he was also a Nen user. Just then, Hisoka suddenly appeared from nowhere and slashed the killer's left eye with a card. Wounded, John Doe immediately retreated. Abaki looked toward Hisoka and said that the killer had escaped, but with his left eye injured, he would probably be captured soon, right? Hisoka stared at the card in his hand and seemed to be thinking about something, as if he had just realized an important detail. After returning to the circus, the 2 of them told everyone about their encounter with the killer. The troupe members were shocked, confused, and worried about Abaki. Just then, Moritonio walked in and reminded them that their upcoming performance would also take place near that area, so everyone needed to be extra careful. Not long after, Abaki came out from taking a bath and told Hisoka that the bathroom was free and he could go use it. Inside the circus bath, Hisoka quietly began experimenting and thinking about creating his own Nen ability. A few days later, Moritonio's circus troupe performed at the Royal Glam Hotel. The performances there were held in the main hall, which could hold up to 100,000 seats. The stage was considered one of the most luxurious and magnificent venues imaginable. If a performer could successfully perform there, it was almost guaranteed that they could succeed anywhere in the world. Everyone in the performing arts dreamed of standing on that stage at least once. The audience was usually made up of the most influential people in Glam Gossland, and receiving their applause was considered a great honor for any performer. That day, Moritonio's circus received endless cheers from the audience at the Royal Glam Hotel. However, later that night, while the troupe members were celebrating the success of the show, both Hisoka and Mori were nowhere to be found. In fact, Moritonio was sitting alone in the empty stage hall of the hotel. By this hour, not a single guest remained. From behind him, Hisoka quietly approached and greeted him. Mori commented on how strangely quiet the place felt. It was hard to believe that during the day it had been so noisy and crowded, yet at this hour it had become eerily silent. He said that after every performance ended, the place always carried a lonely and desolate atmosphere. When a magician creates a miracle, he himself is also swept away by that miracle. But when the miracle disappears, all that remains is an ordinary human being. Mori believed that once you realize miracles never truly existed, everything begins to feel rather sad. He added that tonight's performance had been a huge success, and it made him wonder what the future would hold for the members of the circus troupe. Mori said he would be happy if he could entrust Hisoka with something even more important someday. "This is a good opportunity for us to understand each other better," he said. "What do you think?" Then he asked Hisoka a question. Why had he been lying half dead on the roadside that day? Hisoka replied that he didn't like talking about the past. Mori suggested that they should be honest with each other. If Hisoka told his story, then Mori would tell his as well. Hisoka stared at him coldly and suddenly asked, "Is your left eye all right, John Doe?" Mori looked surprised and asked why he would say that. With a sly smile, Hisoka pointed out that the skin on Mori's cheek was peeling slightly. It looked strange, thicker than normal, as if something was hidden underneath. Mori sighed. "So it's that easy to notice, huh? Maybe I've grown soft over time." He began explaining that long ago, he always loved watching the expressions people made when they were surprised. He enjoyed seeing people overwhelmed by an unstoppable force. Even as a child, he loved performing little tricks for his family just to watch their reactions. But during one of those moments, he accidentally killed his younger sister. That was why he once wanted to become a hunter, or a performer who could travel the world shocking and surprising people wherever he went. Mori said he had tried to live like a normal person, but every time a performance ended, his blood would start boiling, becoming wild and uncontrollable. He couldn't calm down until he destroyed someone. "So yes," Mori admitted, "I am John Doe." Then he asked Hisoka what he intended to do now. Hisoka calmly replied that whether Mori was a serial killer or just a charlatan didn't really matter to him, because in the end he had already obtained what he wanted, and now there was no reason for him to stay here any longer. Hisoka said Mori once claimed he enjoyed surprising people, so this time he should try surprising him instead. The moment he finished speaking, Hisoka activated his nen. Immediately, Mori activated his own nen as well, dodging the cards thrown at him. He remarked that if that was the case, Hisoka would surely allow him to use any method he wanted in this fight. The two of them instantly charged at each other and began battling. When Hisoka tried to slash Mori's face with a card, Mori dodged and used his hat to block Hisoka's vision. In the next moment, Hisoka took a heavy punch to the stomach and coughed up blood. "Just as you wished, I'm coming at you," Mori said. "Go ahead," Hisoka replied. But suddenly, Mori stopped. Since Hisoka had successfully guessed his identity, Mori decided he would reveal the secret behind what people called magic. First, the mystery behind the 100 faces of John Doe was nothing more than an ordinary handkerchief. Mori explained he simply placed the cloth over his face, imagined the face he wanted, and used nen to transform it into reality. He called the technique patchwork reality, scarf ace. Hisoka looked amused. Mori said this was the secret behind the serial killer John Doe, and suggested they could study this magic together. At that moment, an invisible force suddenly slammed into Hisoka, as if a massive steel bar had crashed into his body. He was instantly knocked down onto the stage floor. A second attack came immediately after, but Hisoka managed to dodge it. But however, the moment he stood up, two more invisible forces crushed him from opposite directions, forcing him to spit out blood again. 1, 2, and 3, Mori counted, as he floated into the air. "I can feel it. Your body is being crushed, trembling." Suddenly, Hisoka began to concentrate his nen into his eyes. "I can finally see it now," he said. Mori was shocked when he realized Hisoka was using Gyo. What? When did he learn that? Hisoka immediately broke free from the pressure attack, catching Mori completely off guard. He explained that Mori's trick was actually based on magnetic forces. When Mori performed the sky swimming technique earlier, Hisoka had noticed the metal necklaces worn by members of the audience floating slightly in the air. That was when he guessed Mori was using magnetism combined with metal pieces attached to his body to create the illusion. Those invisible forces that had been smashing into Hisoka were actually magnetic attraction. Mori had revealed the face-changing technique only to mislead Hisoka into thinking that all Nen abilities had visible effects. In reality, his magic was simply magnetic forces pulling objects together. Mori silently admitted to himself that this child possessed terrifying talent. Hisoka joked that the first rule of magic was supposed to be keeping the trick a secret. At that moment, Mori released a massive amount of Nen and activated a technique called steel-plated dipoles, blood magnet. He transformed his aura into magnetic steel pillars. These pillars generated the invisible forces that attacked Hisoka. Mori's Nen ability was to convert his aura into magnetic steel poles. Even revealing the details of his ability was part of his own battle style. Now fighting seriously, Mori launched wave after wave of magnetic pillars toward Hisoka. Hisoka used Nen to pull his body away and dodge the attacks. Suddenly, Hisoka disappeared. Mori wondered where he had gone. Then Hisoka appeared behind him and said that everything had been easier than he expected, especially Mori's trick of floating in the air. At that moment, Hisoka was floating in the air as well. Mori was stunned. He remembered how Hisoka had once copied Kishita's juggling technique and wondered if he had somehow copied Blood Magnet too. But Mori quickly rejected the idea. This wasn't just a simple trick, it was a Nen ability and it required Mori's steel boots to perform. Besides, he had never even taught Hisoka how to use Hatsu, so copying the ability should have been impossible. That unsettling feeling reminded Mori of the hunter exam he once took. Angry, he launched even more magnetic pillars toward Hisoka. Hisoka calmly said that every trick had now been exposed, and it was time to end the show with his own miracle. With a simple snap of his fingers, all the magnetic pillars suddenly reversed direction and pierced into Mori's body, severely injuring him and making him spit out blood. Mori couldn't understand what had just happened. Hisoka explained that his Nen ability allowed him to change the properties of his aura to resemble rubber and gum. He had attached his aura to the magnetic pillars Mori created, then connected them all to a central point, Mori himself. After that, all that remained was for the connections to snap back toward the center. He called this ability Bungee Gum, Elastic Love. Mori remarked that the name sounded like a child's chewing gum, but somehow it suited Hisoka perfectly. Moments later, Mori took his final breath. What Hisoka did with Mori's corpse afterwards seemed almost like a passing whimsy, similar to how he once copied Kishita's juggling technique. Using an ordinary handkerchief, he applied Nen to alter the corpse's face so it would look different. Perhaps Hisoka was simply imitating Mori's technique without thinking, but personally, I think there's something strangely humane about it. If the body were discovered in that state, the circus troupe and the others wouldn't realize it was Mori. The memories they held of him would remain intact. Later, Abaki began searching around, repeatedly calling both Mori and Hisoka's names. She wondered where they had gone since the food was almost gone. Eventually, she sat down in a corner and let out a tired sigh. And that's where the story comes to an end. This is the past of Hisoka, the origin of his Nen ability, the person who taught him, and the reason why Bungee Gum has the properties of both rubber and gum. This biography of Hisoka was actually written and illustrated by Sui Ishida, the creator of Tokyo Ghoul. However, the one-shot was approved by Yoshihiro Togashi, so it can be considered an official side story about the past of Hisoka Morow in the world of Hunter x Hunter. So, are any Hisoka fans here? If you enjoyed this, don't forget to support the channel. See you next time!